ADHD reWired, episode 494. This is the podcast for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD reWired is more than just a podcast. We are a community. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Go to ADHDrewired.com to learn how you can join us in our free and secret Facebook group. Get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter. You can request podcast postcards to distribute to your clients and support groups. Learn all about our award-winning coaching and accountability groups. You can co-work with us in our Adult Study Hall virtual membership community. You can do all of these things by going to our website at ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Welcome back with another episode of ADHD reWired. Today's guest is Caroleen Verley. Caroleen is a former data analyst turned business owner and financial coach. She loves spreadsheets. It already sounds so nerdy. Problem solving, numbers, and data. And she loves working with clients to find order in the chaos of their financial lives. Caroleen has a degree in economics from Yale and spent the first 12 years of her career doing data analysis and data visualization. In addition to her business, Caroleen is also a mom to almost 3 young children. And by the time this episode airs, when you are hearing this right now, she now officially has 3 young children. You're like 8 months pregnant now?
Yeah.
All right. So and she's told me she is feeling very pregnant right now. Caroleen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. I always love having people on who they geek out over stuff that makes my brains just kind of hurt. So I am hoping that some of the things we can talk about today are going to make sense to my first grader kind of brain that does a hard time understanding financial stuff.
Great.
So one of the ideas that we were talking about before we hit record and when we did the pre-interview is this importance and idea about how do we create good systems that work by default. What do you mean by that?
So what I mean by that is really setting yourself up so that you're not trying to rely on, sometimes the advice you'll see is, write down every single dollar that you spend in a notebook or something like that. And that system falls apart the second that you stop doing it. So, a day goes by, 2 days goes by, and you mean well, and you say, okay, well, I'm going to write it all down, but then a week goes by and you can't catch up. So setting up a system that's not reliant on you doing something like that. So, using automations and using the power of a computer to do a lot of the heavy lifting for you so that you're not relying on these things that are really hard to do, setting up systems that are robust and can really support you so that you can ignore it for a week or 2 weeks and then pick it up again. And it's not a disaster, because once it kind of falls apart, it becomes harder and harder. Every week that goes by, getting back on that horse gets harder and harder. So setting up a system that is going to be there and ready for you and working in the background is going to set you up for long-term success.
So you're saying any system that requires you to be kind of 100% consistent with it, no good. No good.
Exactly.
Okay. So when you talk about automation, what kinds of things do you encourage people to set up and automate? And kind of specifically, how do people do that?
I think some of the big things are really automating the things that if you don't do them, something bad will happen. So, something like setting up automations for your bills and paying your credit cards on an automated basis and automating your savings too, so that you can basically not miss those bill due dates, and also save even if you're not really thinking about it. And so using the power of automation to do those things can really be helpful, because otherwise, if it just relies on you doing it, it's more work and there's just more chances of failure.
What have you seen as maybe some of the downfalls or some of the things that maybe could go wrong with automation? And then what are some systems that could be sort of set up as sort of a safety net around those things around the automation?
So you mean in terms of when automations go wrong? Is that?
Yeah.
Because it's true. A lot of the resistance I hear from people initially when they're thinking about automating things, people are often very resistant to the idea of automating credit card bills. And I think that that's often because they've had this experience in the past of potentially, overspending and sort of not knowing what the bill is going to be and being taken by surprise by that bill. And then also kind of worrying that there may be fraudulent transactions that they weren't aware of, or that some charges may be misbilled. But it's something that eventually when people do make the switch, they are very happy that they did. And so I think there's often a fear of automating certain things. Sometimes it's, worrying that there isn't going to be enough money in your checking account to pay that bill when it comes. But I think that that is not necessarily the right solution to that problem. And so setting up other systems to make sure that you do have that money, and that you don't overspend is a better solution than not automating the credit card bill. Because when you don't pay that bill, that's when you get bad marks on your credit score, and you may get, late fees and fines and interest and all sorts of things that not paying it is worse than, paying it on time. And so using that automation to help you. But I do often hear a lot of resistance at first from people who have not been automating things.
It's funny. I have a lot of my stuff automated, and what I think I do is I go through the actual bills about every 3 months just to make sure everything looks, what it's supposed to. But in reality, it's probably not every 3 months. It's probably more like every 6 months, and then I'm not even sure if I'm going back as far as I need to. And that's been a learning curve for me. After more than, I think, 2 years now, divorced. So like my ex used to manage all the finances, and like I was like, thank goodness for that. And then it's like, now I got to figure all this stuff out. Oh boy. And that was sort of one of the things that it was sort of building the habit of just checking in on, like, just opening up the app for the bank account, right, and just looking at it. Because that was definitely like out of sight, out of mind. Everything's fine. Like, okay, I'm not worried about it. Until you realize, like, I just need to transfer money from one account to another so my bills could actually get paid. And it's like, how often do people with ADHD is like, we had the money and yet something bounced just because like we didn't manage where that pile of money was basically sitting in what account.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think we see a lot of sort of this like all or nothing approach with people with ADHD. And so it's either you're managing it all the time or not at all. Maybe even starting with, like, for you, what do you do? So you are utilizing the power of automation, but also making sure you're checking in on your stuff.
Mm-hmm. I think the tricky thing with these automations is that to set up a good system, it requires a lot of time and investment upfront to get a good system. And the idea, and this is, when I work with my clients, it's really about, let's make that upfront investment, because it is going to take time to get everything set up. But the idea is that once you do have it set up, then you can be more, then you let it go on autopilot. You don't have to take as many actions. And the nice thing is that then when you do check in on your bank account, it's really just checking in, making sure everything is working correctly, but you don't necessarily have to take that many actions. I think maybe I can talk a little bit about how, that idea of putting the money in the right spot too, because often when people first come to me, they have, one bank account that, maybe they have a checking account, maybe it's two, they have a checking and a savings account. But typically the very first thing that I will do with people is we open up a whole bunch of extra accounts. And I think sometimes the initial reaction is, well, that makes the system more complicated because you're adding, now you might have 5 bank accounts or 8 bank accounts. There's a trade-off. At some point, you'll have too many. But I think the sweet spot is somewhere around like 5 to 8.
And when you say could it within the same bank, different accounts?
Mostly within the same bank. Okay. I'll talk about savings, I think, a little later too, but mostly within the same bank. But the idea is really to separate your money into these different little pockets so that you have an account that is for bills, and then an account that's for spending, and then an account for saving towards a vacation or a house, or, whatever the goal may be that you're working towards, or for your specific situation, whatever may be relevant. So if you have a really old house that has a lot of repairs, and maybe it makes sense to have a house repair fund, or, you have a car that is on its last legs, and you really want to make sure that next time you bring it into the shop to get repaired, that you have money sitting there that you've dedicated to that purpose. And other people, it's, like saving for vacations. And kind of knowing how much money they have to spend on vacation. And so having each account have a dedicated purpose rather than having everything, mixed together in one account can be, a really useful and powerful first step to understand how much money you have and how much you have for each purpose. Because when it's mixed together is when it's confusing.
Yeah, I could see that. A couple of years ago, I set up a couple of different accounts. One for I had an emergency savings account. What's the idea of having like 3 to 6 months of expenses, and then I set up a vacation account, and then I set up a motorcycle fund.
How are they working for you?
It's great. Yeah, like I have not yet planned the vacation in a while, and I'm a little overdue on that. But the automatic savings keeps on growing. I'm like, oh, I have a good vacation coming up because it's which is wonderful. When you suggested the thing around like house repairs, I was like, oh, I might want to actually consider doing that because I think about the stuff that I have to get done in my house and the projects that are sort of in midstream that are kind of paused. Like, I think it would make me feel a lot more ease knowing that like, oh, that money is there. It's like I can move forward with these projects.
Yeah, what I find is that when you have a dedicated account for different purposes, like the house fund or the vacation fund, what ends up happening is that there's two forces that seem to reinforce each other. One is it's really motivating to save towards that when it's clearly defined. Because if you just have a savings account and you don't label really what it's for, it's not as motivating because you don't, but saving for what? It doesn't speak to you. But saving for a vacation, all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, this feels good. This is something I want to do. So I want to put my money in here. And then on the flip side, when it comes to spending it, I find that oftentimes if your money is just kind of mixed together in the savings account and it's serving a lot of different purposes, like it's your emergency money and your vacation money and your house repair money, when it comes time to spending it, it can be very stressful to spend it because you worry. Oftentimes people report that they went on a vacation and they think that they could afford it, but they weren't really totally sure. And it diminished their enjoyment of it because they were constantly stressed about whether or not they could really afford that trip or not.
So I can see that. Like if you don't have that clarity of like, can I actually afford this? It's sort of like when I talk about in my coaching groups about like time awareness and how so many of us have a hard time saying no. Someone asks, could we do a thing? And maybe you're a people pleaser and you're like, you have no idea how long things actually take you. So you're like, yeah, you can totally do that. Even though you absolutely don't know if you actually have the balance to do it. Which is why we talk a lot about doing time tracking so we can actually develop a really, really clear awareness of how long things actually do take us. And once we discover that clarity around how long things take us, it's way easier to say no to stuff because we actually know whether or not we have the bandwidth or not versus just like this gut feeling thing, which is a horrible way to manage time and money.
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy. I think there's a lot of parallels between managing time and managing money. And it's the same idea. Once you've actually built into your budget how much you can really afford to spend on your vacation, then you have that clarity. And then when you spend it, very clearly, this is, I've allocated this money and this time to my vacation and I can spend it and not worry about it and not worry that I'm compromising some other goals because I had earmarked this specifically for this purpose. And the whole purpose of vacation with this example is enjoy your life and increase your happiness. So if you're not enjoying your spending as much as you could, it's too bad. So it's nice to really have a clear idea that, yes, I can afford this because I have set this money aside and kind of quiet that concern in the back of your mind that maybe I can't actually afford this trip that I'm on, but I'm on it and I'm spending the money anyway.
It was when in February, beginning of March 2022, I went and saw fish in Mexico. It was a bucket list goal to see. So they played 4 nights on the beach and they played at this all-inclusive resort. So it was a really nice, okay, so we were there for about a week. And I loved the all-inclusive resort because it's like you don't have to think about like, it's already been paid for, so you don't have to think about like the money piece while you're on vacation, which I found very freeing and relaxing. And it's sort of that idea, like everything in moderation, including moderation, right? So you can sort of indulge without having to break the bank.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of allocating time, I do need to allocate just a few minutes here to take a quick break. But when we come back, I have a lot more questions for you. So we will be right back. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from ARC. ARC is ADHD Rewired Coaching. Learn more and get on our fall interest list at coachingrewired.com. Hey, are you struggling to reach significant milestones and moving forward with fewer goals? Does the future feel uncertain because as much as you try to get organized and plan ahead, you get caught up in the whirlwind of everyday life and you feel like you can't get anything done? What if you could create actionable plans tailored to your ADHD, have support and accountability to act on those plans, all while learning and working alongside other adults with ADHD who actually understand the challenges we face? That's where group coaching comes in. Because support can begin right here with ADHD Rewired's award-winning coaching and accountability groups. Yes, getting caught up in the whirlwind of life can happen. It even happens to me sometimes. And yes, our ADHD can get in the way. And sometimes, as much as we try to avoid it, our ADHD gets us into the whirlwind too. And that's okay. We get it, but with the right tools, a better understanding of how we can navigate through life with ADHD, and a supportive community of like-brained adults to help us steer out of those whirlwinds, we can do more than just manage our ADHD. We can actually thrive with our ADHD. If this sounds like the step that will help push you forward to turning your intentions into action and achieving your goals, go now to coachingrewired.com and click on that big button at the top of the page to add your name to our fall interest list. And then keep an eye out in your email so you can stay up to date for our upcoming fall registration events, and they're coming soon. Get started, stay in the loop about our fall sessions, and learn more at coachingrewired.com. And if you're listening to this way into the future, the website is still coachingrewired.com to get the most up-to-date information on everything we are doing with our coaching and accountability groups. Come grow with us. That's at coachingrewired.com. All right, we are back. I don't know if you had how many different banks you've worked with before. I was wondering if you have any thoughts on any specific banks and their apps or their web interfaces, and if you found any of them to be either more or less kind of ADHD friendly.
Good question. Typically, I don't recommend any particular bank over another. Typically, we work within the banking system that the client already has. That said, there is a big range, and I've now seen a lot of them. But I often find, local banks are great. There's sort of a trade-off and a balance, but the sort of the larger local banks tend to have pretty good online systems and pretty nice apps. The one that I use personally, it's not going to be available in a lot of other areas, but I would say kind of look to your own local banks and see who's kind of big enough that they have the money to invest in good apps and good systems for their clients, but aren't too big. And so it's a nice balance between, you have somebody to call when you don't know how to do something, and somebody will answer the phone and tell you what to do. So yeah, that's not really a satisfying answer, I'm sure. And I would say test out a few, because banks are always offering actually quite lucrative deals to get you to try their bank, and they hope that you'll stick with them. But you can often find different promos that different banks are offering to, try their bank and use it for 3 months, and they'll pay you $300 or $400 just to try it. But I've never actually found the need to switch banks with any clients. So maybe I don't think they're all that different from each other. I will talk about one app that I've discovered recently. I have no affiliation with them, and I'm just testing them out, but I think this could be very promising, and I have a few clients that are trying it out right now. It's an app called Cube Money, Cube with a Q. So and what I like about it is that QUBE.
Okay.
And what I like about it is it replicates a lot of the systems that I like to have with clients with multiple bank accounts, but it allows you to have different buckets within one bank account. And so the idea there is that you sort of send a certain amount of money to this app, and there's a sort of a bank behind the app. You then can allocate the money into different envelopes and different buckets, but electronically. So you can say, I'm going to, whatever it is that number is for your budget. And it's always risky to throw out numbers because everyone's budgets are so different. But for some people, it might be $100 a week. For other people, it's $500 a week, might be $1,000 a week. It's whatever fits into your budget and your needs and, how many people you're buying for. But, you divert a certain amount of money into there and you can then allocate it into different envelopes. So you could have a dining out envelope and a groceries envelope and whatever categories, personal care or, whatever the categories are that are the major categories for your spending. And then what's really nice is that instead of managing cash, you're able to, move the money between those different accounts electronically, but really have tight guardrails around your spending. So it's very easy, I think, to see how much money you have available for each of these different categories and these different buckets. So it's a very similar system to what I do with my clients with multiple bank accounts, but this allows you to do it within one bank instead of having multiple accounts. So I think that one looks very promising.
I imagine that most of the bank apps have the feature to do mobile like check deposit.
Yeah. I haven't seen many that don't.
Okay. Because I was like, when that started becoming like a regular thing, I was like, oh my God, thank God. Because like, I can't even tell you, like, checks are like the worst when you have ADHD. Like, it's like, oh, this is a piece of paper. There's steps involved in like actually turning this into money that is now mine. And so it's wonderful to be able to use the mobile deposit. It's super easy.
Yeah, I agree. And my recommendation, clients always ask, like, well, how often should I pay my bills or how often should I deposit checks? And for checks, I say, just deposit it right away. Get that piece of paper out of your hands and put it into your account. And you're right. Having the mobile check deposit is such a great improvement.
So you mentioned like looking for sort of deals with different banks on promos they have for setting up accounts. What about credit cards? Because credit cards also offer like different promotions and you can get low or even sometimes no interest for a certain period of time. There's miles, there's all these different promos. Like, so what are your thoughts on credit cards? Because they can be a very helpful tool and they can also get people in trouble.
That's very true. I used to think, you can definitely take advantage of the credit card companies and it's a great tool. But as I've been doing this several years now, I've actually become more and more conservative on credit cards. And it's just really, really hard for people to manage them successfully. The credit card companies, they know this. And I think it really is quite predatory because they're offering such lucrative sign-on bonuses and the points. And there's just sort of this very subtle psychological pull that really, I think, messes with your spending and your savings. And it just makes it so easy to overspend. And the biggest issue is that it really makes it hard for people to know how much money they've spent and how much money they actually have left to spend. Yeah, I've gotten much more conservative on credit cards. I just think that they are so potentially dangerous for overspending that often it's better to avoid them, not entirely. And so what I will typically recommend for clients is, you have to kind of play this game because this is the system we have. You want a good credit score because, you want to be able to buy a car and a house. And, when those things are goals that you have, like you want to, you kind of have to play this game that we have in the system of having a good credit score. But the solution I'll typically recommend for clients is use a credit card for the things that are automated. So, your phone bill, and if your utility company lets you pay on a credit card or, whatever you can automate that's not really a decision point and is not the thing that's getting you into trouble on a month-to-month basis. Put those things on a credit card and then automate that payment because then you can build up your credit score. You can kind of reap the benefits of having that credit card and improving your score. But at the same time, it can be dangerous for the day-to-day spending because you can just so easily have your spending get out of hand because, when you look at the balance on your credit card, it's confusing because how much of it is money you spent this month versus how much money you spent last month, but you haven't paid the bill yet, or maybe you paid the bill and it hasn't processed. It just gets very confusing. And I think that confusion is the most dangerous piece of it because if you don't know how much you've spent, how can you really know if you can afford something or not?
I growing up, as a musician, I was always getting like gear and I would like go to like Guitar Center and they had like the 0%, for 18 months. And that's how I got like keyboards and amps and stuff like that. And that actually helped my credit score. Like, I started doing that pretty young. I think my parents were probably co-signers initially, but like I have a really good credit score, which is kind of in some ways kind of surprising to me. But I think part of it is like knowing what the limits of your spending are and like being just like aware of your tendencies. I
Mhm.
definitely lean more towards the like budgeting by feeling approach, which I know is not a recommended approach, but like it hasn't gotten me into trouble yet. Like I always have a sense of about how much I'm spending and how much is coming in, which is totally, I think, in some ways, a very much of a privilege. I think in some ways, I've heard from people who like don't have that luxury of like having stuff set aside, so they actually have to budget. Like otherwise, like they're going to be bouncing stuff all over the place. So how can someone, if they're afraid of this impulsive spending, still develop that credit
Mhm.
score?
I would say that kind of what you're describing too, just answer your actual question. Like eventually you can bring a credit card back into your picture. Like once you do know what it feels like to spend within your means. Often when clients come to me, they're spending beyond their means at the beginning. And so a lot of it is this recalibration of really starting to understand how much you really can afford. And that's where the credit cards are dangerous. But when you do get to a point where you do understand how much you're spending, or if you want to invest more time in kind of tracking what you are spending, or some people like to pay off their credit card more frequently, like pay it off every week instead of waiting for that credit card bill to come. And so there are ways to manage that for people who really want to keep using their cards, because there is a lot of resistance to going away from those. But now I've forgotten your question, but um, how can people use credit cards responsibly? I think was
Yeah,
the
I think it was like if you know you have that maybe the impulsive tendency and have overspent and have gotten yourself in trouble, but you still want to be able to have a credit history so you can do the things like get a mortgage and a loan for a car and stuff like that. Like, where's that balance?
Yeah. So I think it's using them strategically. So, using them for all those automated things that you're not going to get yourself into trouble on a month to month basis because of your phone bill, because you know what that phone bill is going to be every month. So putting that on the credit card. And that allows you to build that credit score. And then also using it strategically for, like, if you're going to go on a trip, something that you hopefully, saved money aside for in your travel account, but then putting those travel expenses on a credit card. If you're buying a large appliance or something like that, then that makes sense. Put that on a credit card. And then to be able to have that at the same time, to understand how much money you have left in your various cash accounts, you can pay off that credit card bill sooner than it's due. And it is a balance, because often the credit card companies, they'll come with, I would not buy like a new dishwasher with my debit card. I would buy it on a credit card because I want to make sure that I get, the credit cards they'll offer like an additional year warranty, extending the manufacturer's warranty or something like that. That it can often be very good as a consumer to have those protections, but it's more the day-to-day spending that can get out of hand on the credit card. So it's restaurants and clothes and personal care and the things that feel small and you're not really keeping track of them day to day. The $30 purchases, the $40 purchases, that they just feel like, okay, well, it's only $30. Then at the end of the month, you see your credit card bill and you're shocked by the total. It's those ones that I think can often kind of have a blended strategy of credit cards for some things and not for others can be
Mm.
helpful.
When we were talking before, you mentioned this idea that like the cheaper option is not always cheaper.
Mm.
What do you mean by that?
I think that this is another place where there's these sort of subtle psychological manipulations that kind of get to us. And, the merchants are always they're trying to do their job, which is to get people to spend more and buy more. And so kind of identifying these things and sort of creating your own little internal rules of when you will and will not play into those things. One example is, when you are subscribing to something and you wanted to subscribe for a month and that was your plan, but then they say, well, it's $11.99 per month, but it's 40% off per month if you do the annual subscription. And all of a sudden you think, oh, wow, that's so much cheaper, 40% less. But the reality is maybe you weren't going to use it for all those months. And so you're buying more than what you need. And then in the end, you end up spending more than you would have had you paid the full price for the month or two. And this is what I see a lot of times, I think, and it's magnified with ADHD, is that you have all these ideas, you find this new app and whatever it is that struck your fancy at that moment, like, it sounds like you kind of are convinced, okay, I'm going to use this the whole year. But what ends up happening is that you maybe use it a few times and then now you're locked into the annual subscription.
Mhm.
But then what, you've spent so much more than you needed to. And so with subscriptions, what I will often recommend is, just sign up for 1 month And then immediately, whatever that app is, or whatever it is that you've signed up for, immediately just go in and cancel it. And typically you'll get the month that you paid for. And by the time that month comes due, and then you want to, you would be paying that second month, see if you actually want to subscribe again. And oftentimes you'll have either moved on to something else or forgotten about it, or you don't care about it anymore. But then at that point, you don't have to go in and cancel it at a later date. And then often if you do decide that you wanted to continue with it, then you'll be getting coupons of like, come back, 70% off for the year.
It is amazing how many companies you say you go to like cancel and it's like, wait, what if we give you 90% off? I'm like, okay. SiriusXM is a huge one like that, where it's like their normal thing is like $20 some. And I'm like, okay, there's podcasts. Why am I going to spend $20 some for SiriusXM? So like every year, basically they have a promotion. It's like $5.99 a month. I'm like, I'll spend $5.99 a month for SiriusXM. And so I just last month I went through this where I went to go cancel it, knowing that I would get that offer, and I did. Because like, no, I just want to cancel, and like, well, it's like, no, I'm like, to me, the service is worth $5 a month. It is not worth what the full price. So I'm either canceling or matching that. And they did. And I think there's a lot of things like that. The other thing that I've also done, and I love the idea of like canceling it right away. I've definitely done that on those apps that have like the 3-day free trial, which is kind of a new thing, which is, it kind of weirds me. I don't care for that. But so I'll go in and cancel it right away to see if I like it. But for an app that I really want to give a good shot, I'll put 2 to 3 months in my calendar to tell myself like, hey, you bought this app on this date. You're doing a month-to-month payment right now. Do you like this? If you have been using it, go in and do the yearly plan. But so it's sort of that note to my future self that I put in my calendar to ask myself, hey, are you using this app? If yes, go, do the yearly plan. If not, go cancel it. That's something we do in our alumni community every maybe a couple times a year, is get people kind of audit all of their accounts, especially their digital ones, like the stuff with the app stores and stuff like that. Because it's amazing how often we will discover like we totally forgot we signed up for a thing, and it's like, how much have we been paying for this thing that we haven't been using? Which is like just a common way I think we pay the ADHD tax. So the more you can sort of set those reminders to yourself, I have found to be very helpful.
That's why I like the strategy of just canceling it right away. Like literally go in and subscribe and then log back in and cancel, because then you don't have to even have that item on your to-do list. And if it's something that you are using and that you like, then you'll have the motivation to go in and sign up for it again. It's always easier to sign up than to cancel. And kind of allowing yourself to say, no, I'm going to pick the more expensive option, which is the monthly option, even though the thing that feels more expensive, but as an investment in testing it out. Because otherwise you just don't want to automatically play into the idea of, well, the whole year is cheaper, because it's going to be cheaper per month, but only if you're actually using it, which, you can kind of think back of all the subscriptions that you've signed up for, like how many are you actually using at the 1 year mark as much as you thought you would be?
So last year I started riding motorcycles, and I've already been looking for, so I bought my first motorcycle last year, and it's a very like first motorcycle kind of motorcycle. Like it's not crazy powerful. It's like it's a small cruiser, and I'm ready for a little bit of a faster motorcycle. And a lot of places with motorcycles, like they don't even let you test drive it. Like if you want it, you have to buy it. And I'm like, well, who's gonna who does that? So I have been finding there's companies where you can literally rent a motorcycle for a day. Again, yeah, it might be $200 some to rent for the day. But like, if I'm going to make a purchase that's a couple $1,000s, I would like to know if I'm actually going to like the thing. So I've been looking at places where I can test ride for a day before I make that next purchase.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I have never bought a motorcycle, so I was not aware of that motorcycle market, but I think that's a very sound strategy. So sometimes, yeah, allowing yourself to do what feels more expensive and what feels kind of wasteful, like, well, am I going to really waste $200 on testing a motorcycle? But it's not wasting. It's really an investment in figuring out, is this something I'm going to like? And is it worth spending the rest of the money on it? And so fighting against that instinct of, I'm doing the more expensive thing and I shouldn't do that, because that is very powerful. The other place I see it is like if you're buying something online and there's a free shipping minimum. And let's say you intended to buy one shirt, then you see the little pop-up that says, well, put $17 more in your cart, and then you'll have free shipping. And then what that does is that you're, okay, I want to be economical with my money. I want to be thrifty. I don't want to pay for shipping. And so then you go browsing through the website looking for other things to buy. And eventually, I guarantee you, most times you will spend more than what you were otherwise going to pay for shipping that like let's say it would have been $7 to ship the only thing that you wanted. Now all of a sudden you've put $50 more in your cart. And
I've been guilty of that before.
It's so powerful. I mean, because it really makes you feel like you're doing the right thing. Like I'm not going to pay for shipping. Let me buy something else. Let me be economical with my free shipping, but it really manipulates your spending habits.
It's like coupons where it's like, you can get $5 off when you spend $100, but I actually only need like $10 worth of this thing.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Let's take a really quick break. I got some questions about debt when we come back. So we will be right back. Wouldn't it be cool if support for this podcast came from ScoreBrain 3000? What is ScoreBrain 3000, you ask? Well, it's not real, but here's what it is. Whether you're playing basketball in the driveway, baseball, or pickleball, the ScoreBrain 3000 is an incredible gadget that you wear on your wrist that keeps score for you. We've probably all played sports where we feel like we're constantly forgetting the score or whose turn it is. I know for me, it's the worst part of my pickleball game, the part of the game that I don't think I'll ever really improve on. I mean, not only do you have to say the score, you also have to say if it's first or second serve. That's 3 numbers to keep track of. So when you say out loud 4, 5, 2, the ScoreBrain hears it and then will display it right on your wrist. I've personally tested the ScoreBrain, and let me tell you, it's a game changer. Pun intended. It's almost like having a personal scorekeeper in your pocket. And the best part, it's so simple, even Aunt Martha could use it. And yes, we're still trying to get her to understand podcasts. It's so easy to use. Just say, ScoreBrain, keep score. I'm playing pickleball doubles. It works for racket sports, basketball, baseball, and competitive hot dog eating. Oh wait, what's that? I'm just getting word that the hot dog eating contest is still in beta mode. But you know what? That's okay. Because here at ADHD reWired, we believe in living life in beta mode. And while ScoreBrain is not real, I seriously wish someone would invent that, because yes, I would buy that. I wish this was a real thing. But what I don't need to wish for is having a space and a place for ADHD neurodivergent brains. Like in our ADHD-friendly body doubling community at adultstudyhall.com, where members get real-time, on-demand accountability and themed and guided co-working sessions. I'm actually recording this from our monthly Pomodoro dance party right now. Need to clean and declutter? We've got sessions for that too. Have some writing to do? We've got sessions for that too. Find all of our Adult Study Hall events at adultstudyhall.com. Then consider becoming a patron if you love this show at adhdrewired.com/Patreon. Patrons at $5 a month or more can get full, uninterrupted episodes of this show. Need more support? Then patrons at the $25 a month level can jump in for our monthly coaching call every 4th Tuesday of the month. Last month, we only had one person show up, so they literally got an hour of coaching with me for $25. I can't think of a better deal that you're going to get from that, since I especially don't do any one-on-one coaching. But if you're ready for a more intense group coaching experience, of course, check out our coaching groups and what they are all about at coachingrewired.com. While the ScoreBrain isn't real, our brains are, and everything here at ADHD Rewired is real. Learn more about everything we do at ADHDrewired.com. That's ADHDrewired.com. And thanks for listening. All right, we are back. All right, so Caroleen, what about, a lot of the stuff we've been talking about is like being sort of wiser and setting up strategies around spending. And I have to imagine there may be some listeners who were like, that sounds really great. I could barely pay my bills. So the idea of putting stuff away for savings is a pipe dream at this moment. What do you recommend to people who are in that situation, especially if they have significant debt?
Yeah. So a lot of clients, come to me with significant debt, and that's, kind of where we start. And I would say the worst thing you can do is kind of get to a point where you feel hopeless that, you can't save. And I think everyone needs to start wherever they can. And so, wherever that is for you, if that's setting aside $5 a month or $50 a month, or, this is where numbers are dangerous because everybody's numbers are so different. But whatever is a number that you can do, is a good place to start. Because if you don't start, then it's just, a year from now, 2 years from now, then like it's just harder and harder to start. But once you start wherever you can always increase it over time. And as your situation changes, like if you're working on paying off credit card debt, maybe it's, setting up a habit, putting $5 a month or $5 a week or whatever that number is for you into a dedicated savings account. So you build that habit and that muscle, and you can start to feel that reward of seeing that amount of money increase. Then when you pay off that first credit card, pay off that second one, when you get to a point where you've freed up some more money in your cash flow, start to dedicate that money to savings instead. So, when you do, have that roadmap of maybe it's going to take me 3 years to pay off this credit card debt, but then as soon as I pay it off, take that money that you were formerly paying to the credit card companies to pay off the credit card debt and start paying it to yourself and to your savings. But at that point, you've already created that savings account. You've already started contributing to it, kind of have that muscle built up. So it's much easier to change the amount that you're contributing than to all of a sudden start from zero. So, and as your situation changes, a lot of people, hopefully you get a cost of living increase, or, you get a promotion or a raise, or, you can take advantage of those times where your income increases to say, well, take a portion of that increase your standard of living. And often, sometimes it's not even something that it's not a choice. Like, your rent went up. You have to use some of that, or, a big portion of it to address your increased expenses, especially right now when inflation is so high. But use those opportunities where all of a sudden you have more money in your cash flow, whether it's through a reduced expense or an increase in your income.
I wanted to ask you about that specifically.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I know there's no one size fits all for any of this stuff, but when people are, they're kind of doing the math, they're like, there's not enough money to cover the expenses or to put money away for savings. Do you find that it's easier to have people focus on how do we cut costs or how do we make more money?
I guess it's going to be so situation dependent. Do you have opportunities to earn more money? And, some people, maybe you have free time that you can dedicate to, and you love dogs. And I have some clients who take on dogs through Rover. And so for them, that feels
What's Rover?
An easy way. Oh, Rover is like Airbnb for dogs.
Whoa. Okay.
I have quite a few clients who that's the way they like to earn a little extra cash, is when people go away for the weekend and they need a place for their dog, they can take them for the weekend. And I think can earn like $50 or $60 a day taking care of somebody's dog. And some people love dogs, and this for them is an enjoyable pastime. I love spreadsheets and not so much dogs, but I will help people with their spreadsheets. But yeah.
I wish I loved spreadsheets because I can see them being so powerful. They just overwhelm me. Are there certain buckets of expenses that you think is worthwhile to look at because there's like a common opportunity to cut expenses? Like, are there expenses that you see often, like people, like they can do certain things, like call your cable company regularly to see if you can renegotiate that, or like cut out the Starbucks, because if you're looking at how much you're spending on those $4 coffees and how often you're getting them, like that adds up quite a bit. Like, are there certain categories or types of things that you think are sort of that low-hanging fruit opportunities to lower some costs?
The lowest hanging fruit is often the thing that you have like no compromise on the quality of your life, but you've saved money. And so the idea of, the cable company does, and, internet. So oftentimes if you kind of put in a 10 minutes, 15 minutes to give them a call and see if they'll lower your rate, you won't have success every time, but enough that it's probably worth it to do that periodically. But cell phones are a place where I often find that there's kind of a lot of untapped potential. There are all these, I forget the acronym, I think MVNO, but they're basically like cell phone network resellers. One that a lot of my clients have switched to is called Mint Mobile, but there are quite a few others. But it's basically for like $200 a year instead of $100 something, $200 a month. People report that they have excellent coverage, and it's often the same networks that the major cell phone companies are selling. I think the big thing is that it takes a little bit of time and research to figure out how to switch, and that's enough of a barrier that for most people don't even want to bother, and they're kind of worried that the quality is not going to be as good. But I really hear almost universal, people just are happy with the service that they're getting under these phone resellers. And so that's an easy place to, have a really big opportunity. The one hitch is that you have to have your phone be paid off. So you may have to, if you have a phone that you're paying off on a monthly basis with your existing phone plan, you do have to pay off the phone before you can switch. But that's one to certainly look into. And I think it's in that category of you save money, but you don't have any compromise. So those are the ones to certainly address first. Starbucks is a trickier one because for some people, they get a lot of enjoyment and pleasure from their coffee. So it's really kind of figuring out which things for you are not worth the trade-offs that you're making. So for some people who love coffee, like that's not the place to cut. But if you're just as happy making coffee at home, then sure. But sort of figuring out what's the best use of your limited dollars, because whatever that number is, we all have a limited number of dollars that we can spend. And for some people that number is lower and some people that number is higher, but figuring out what's the optimal use of those dollars for you. And so what are the things that give you the biggest enjoyment or the biggest bang for your buck? And so if that is coffee, don't cut the coffee. But if that's not coffee, then that could be a one to cut. I think the first step is figuring out how much are you spending on these things? And then which are the ones that are the biggest priority for you?
Do you have a favorite book or resource for helping people who maybe are coming to terms with have to wrap their brain around financial stuff and it's just been hard for them? Do you have a favorite book or resource that you would recommend for that?
So I'm a big fan of Ramit Sethi's I Will Teach You to Be Rich, because I think it's written in a really accessible way and it's very simple and kind of actionable and clear, and that is a great resource. So I would highly recommend that as a first stop. He has a podcast and a new Netflix show now too, but the book is an excellent roadmap, I think, for just getting started, and in a way that there's no, he doesn't use financial jargon, and it's very accessible and it's not intimidating or overwhelming.
Excellent. Well, we'll put a link to that in the show notes. We will also link to your website in the show notes, which is untangleyourmoney.com. Are there any final thoughts or anything else you want to share before we wrap this conversation up?
Well, thank you so much for having me. And it was a pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric.
This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHDrewired.com. You can find time-stamped summaries and additional resources for each episode. Apply to join our free and secret Facebook community. Learn more about our award-winning intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. Join the Adult Study Hall virtual co-working membership community. Find all the other podcasts on the ADHD Rewired podcast network. Sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content that you won't hear anywhere else. And use the search tool to find episodes on specific topics. You can do all of this at ADHDrewired.com. While you're there, click on the Patreon button. If you are a regular listener, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to you, the listener, but it's not free to produce. Plus, patrons get cool perks like ad-free episodes and access to recordings of coaching calls, and $25 a month patrons can join me once a month for a group coaching call. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHD Rewired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. Subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube to see selective interviews and other videos I've made. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends, family, your therapists, your coaches, doctors, siblings, parents. And if you, your coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at the website, ADHDrewired.com. If you're a member of CHAD, ADA, or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this show and all of the shows on the ADHD reWired podcast network. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. And if you really loved this particular episode, please hit share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I do count on you to help spread this message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other app that supports reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at Audible by going to audibletrial.com/ADHD rewired. Here is my list of must-listen-to audiobooks updated July 2021. Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Attached by Amir Levin and Rachel Heller. Atomic Habits by James Clear. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. Crucial Conversations by Carrie Patterson. The Coaching Habit by Michael Stainer. The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Rest by Alex Sujong Kim Pang. The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins. Make It Stick. The Science of Successful Learning by Peter Brown. The Productivity Project by Chris Bailey. Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics by Dan Harris. Change Your Questions, Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. I always recommend to my coaches and admin that they read that book. The One Thing by Gary Keller, a required reading for all of our coaching group members. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Baden. The 4 Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. And if you're looking for something a little bit more magical, I have fallen in love with the Harry Potter series, and the narrator, Jim Dale, is amazing. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brene Brown bus, all of her stuff is great, starting with Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, and the Power of Vulnerability. And if you're an entrepreneur or leader, be sure to check out her book, Dare to Lead. Do you have something that you would like to share? Click on the podcast tab at ADHD Rewired. Click the button to be a guest at the top of the page and schedule a 15-minute interview. This is Eric Tivers, reminding you to keep learning, growing, and connecting. Self-care is not selfish. No matter what you get done or don't get done, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. And we don't need to do them in the hardest way possible. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.